Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a disassembly and first impressions video for you on this little guy right here. This is the Herman Knives Vespertilio. Very, very nice little knife here. This guy is currently dead center. The action is great. And there's no blade play. There's really nothing going on here that's anything other than awesome. So let's go ahead and take this guy apart. What I am seeing here immediately in terms of construction is a torque screw, which, hallelujah, as well as these three, which appear to be T6 screws. Let's see about that. Yeah, T6. Okay, what is this torque screw? It's big, is one thing I know. This is bigger than T10. Maybe it's a T15. That seems about right. T20 could be. Is it T20? It is T20. So this torque screw is sort of by request. I asked Polish Custom Knives, who were the folks who sent this guy along, full disclosure, if Herman ever did, because he tends to do weird proprietary hardware, and he includes the little tools, so I'm mostly okay with it. But I asked, hey, could you ever do a proprietary hardware piece that looks like a torque spit? And they said, well, yeah, actually, I guess that's on the option. And so they went ahead and they did that. So that's excellent to see. And so I've popped out the pivot already. Wow, that was way easier. Thank you, Herman. And now I'm going to go ahead and pop out these back screws. And let's go ahead and I'm going to take out these screws. I'll just use these tweezers because why not? And I'll put them in the proper ordering that they came off the knife in my little holder over there. Come on. There we go. And grab this. And now the knife should more or less come apart. There we go, yeah. So here went the, to start with, here went the backspacer. This backspacer is a chunk of Damascus, and it's real Damascus. You can see here the little bit of grooving that you see in it. A little bit of groovation. Oh, yeah, that looks pretty good. You can see the Damascus here in the scale itself. And everything else should pop off, so here we go. That the fact that I'm already at this stage makes this the easiest Herman knife ever to disassemble that I've had across my table. I love Herman Knives. I've turned into a gigantic fanboy for Herman Knives. They're great. But the biggest issue they've had historically is that they've been a pain in the neck to disassemble. So I'm really glad to see that, not only with the torque spit thing there, but just, generally speaking, you don't have to take off the screw, the clip that is, to get to these screws. This is going a whole lot smoother than usual. One thing to watch out for, though, with Herman is that historically speaking, at least, the bearings in here have been loose. See that right there? It's just what I was talking about. One of the bearings already came out of there. And these are little tiny bearings. And so this is the reason that you see in me on a mat here that has a border around it. So that way I can get, I can get to all these bearings, but I don't have to worry about losing any of them. So I'll put that there, and then I'll put this, and actually, let me see if I can just drop this back into the cage here. That'll make things easier. And what I'm going to do is just kind of run the bearings around here. On this piece of fabric, therefore, hopefully, what that'll let me, which is a lot like letting and allowing at the same time, what that'll let me do is just get these bearings clean off without them going everywhere. Then I'll go ahead and I'll pull this bearing off to the side here. And then what I'm going to do is go the other side, and again, I'll get a fabric swatch a little bit wet here with some rubbing alcohol, and I'll try and pull out the bearings on the other side here. I pop the pivot through here, and then I'll lift this out using these tweezers and drop it into place. So, yeah, there's that. If you're curious, by the way, about any of the tools that I'm using for this or any other disassembly, go ahead and check out nickshabazz.com/tools. You will see a listing of all of them that are in use, including the ones here. So that's good. And see here, one of the little bearings popped out, but I just pushed it back into place. So there we go. Next step is to clean off the blade. And I could probably do this. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to leave these washers right there and not move them around too much because I don't want to lose those little balls, so to speak. What we see here is a couple of things. A, the blade finish on this guy appears to be some kind of a stone wash or another, but we can see here that the Herman actually did keep the blade masked in the areas that it was going to be riding onto the against the bearings, so to speak, which is a beautiful thing. I'm a fan of that. And so there's that. What else is there? Anything else worth highlighting here? There are stainless steel washers on top of the titanium, making this a little bit easier. Go ahead and clean this off right there. Very nice. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean off the pivot. The pivot is interesting in that it looks like it's just a round pivot at first, but then you look at the side of it and you'll see that it has all of these little tiny grooves milled into it. And those grooves correspond with grooves inside this, and it's hidden in the texture, so you barely see it, but this is in fact not a free spinning pivot. This is a little detail, but it's one that just, oh man, I love. So I'm a big fan of that choice right there. And actually, since there's a little bit of the gunction trapped around the corner there, I'm going to use a Q-tip here and just get up inside here and clean the outside. Beautiful. And while I'm doing this, I'll use that same Q-tip to get inside the blade here and remove a little bit of gunk from there. And the detent ball hole looks largely clean, but there we go. At this point, we are largely good to go. We see here the titanium, well, God, that sure feels like tie. But we see the lock bar here. We see some internal milling here to keep this guy weight down. And we see that there's no internal milling over here because, well, there's the inlay on the other side. So that's nice. What all else are we seeing here? We see Vespertilio 2020. You know, look, it's good to go. So it's time to start putting this guy back together. I'll go ahead and I'll drop the pivot into position here to start with. And again, I want to make sure that these are aligned properly so that they so that the pivot can fully seat, and now they have. So beautiful. I'm going to use some 10-weight nano oil on this guy just to see if we can't get it running beautifully. I'll put a little bit onto the pivot here, and then I'll put a little bit onto the this portion here. Next step is going to be to put one of these washers down onto there. I'll go ahead and put this one there. My biggest fear here right now is that I would accidentally put one of these little, let one of these little ceramic balls fall down into the pivot. That would be a pain in the neck to get back out, and, you know, I just don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll rotate these little balls here, and that should let me, you know, distribute the lubrication across the top of the balls there. And that's great. That'll make things run a lot smoother and make everything reasonably happy. So there's that. I'll also go on ahead and I'm going to put some lubrication into the detent ball hole on this guy. And go ahead and just put a little bit on this side here as well. What this will do is allow the detent ball, which appears to be, by the way, ceramic, along with ceramic bearings. But I'll put the detent ball, that lubrication will help that run a little smoother. Whoopsies. And we pop that back through again, making sure that we are fully seated. One thing to note is that the lock bar has a tendency to scoot out past this guy when the knife is disassembled. Doesn't particularly matter, but, you know, we just need to make sure we're, you know, putting everything back in proper orientation. So we're doing this here. Go ahead and I'll put a little bit of lubrication right there. Lift this off, and we will gently place that into position. Great, now I rotate. That should spread the lubrication onto the bearings there. I'll go ahead and just drop on this washer here. Right there. And that way that's just right on top of there. And then we have to get ourselves put back together. So the only downside to this current, you know, assembly approach here is that we have, I need to get these screws into position on the other side here. I should have done this a little bit earlier, but the reason I need to get these in place is so that I can spear the backspacer. The backspacer doesn't go anywhere. So I'm going to do that now. The other thing, the other thing I'm going to try and do, at least, God willing, is to get this screw through here. There we go. The other thing I'm going to try and do before I do anything further here is to put a little bit of thread locker onto the ends of these screws here. And just kind of a little kiss of it on the side there. And now all three of these screws, yeah, I got some on there. All three of these screws, I'll give that one a little bit more love, are ready to go. So I can just now drop onto this the backspacer. And see, this is now going to be held in position, in its proper position by those screws themselves. Then I can press down the lock bar here. That's going to be important. Then I can, ideally, pop this pivot So I'm going to have to lower the, oh, damn it, the pivot rotated slightly. But I have to lower, there we go, lower the lock bar here, which allows me to push the pivot through. Then what I need to do is get these screws into their holes on the other side here without them coming out. So what I'm going to do to start with here is just to use one of these, and I just got to get one of these reasonably seated. Get one of these so it's grabbing. Doesn't need to be perfect, just need to get a little bit of grab going on there. Beautiful. 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 This should mean that none of these screws are trying to come out, right? Yeah. This also should mean, okay, there's that. Do I have everything in place here? I've got bearings. Oh, that's already, I feel that's smoother. Okay, next up is going to be a bit of thread locker on the pivot here. Ah, there we go. Good. Drop that there. Beautiful. And just using this to hand tighten for the moment here. My reason for doing it this way is just to get everything kind of roughly in position before I put any real torque on it. So now what I'll do is, again, pop these guys sort of the rest of the way in here. Right now, the pivot is a little too loose. The way I can tell that, among many things, is that the blade is over to this side, which makes sense. If the pivot is too loose, the lock bar is always going to press the blade this direction. So what I'll probably do, I'll flip it out just to confirm that. Yeah, we have a little bit of blade play there. So what I'll do is I will tighten this down just a touch further. There we go. We are now roughly dead centered. What I'm going to do here is just release the tension a little bit from these guys here. Just to make sure everything, you know, there's no other tension in the system here. And I'll tighten these guys down. That's in. That's in. And that's in. Perfect. I am wondering whether I over-tightened this very slightly. So let's back it up just a touch. There we go. And we are good to go. I'm just going to go ahead and take one final glance in there, make sure everything looks okay. But it feels great. It sure looks good. There's no blade play. And I wonder if I loosen this just even the slightest bit more, does that win me anything? Is that the tiniest hint of play? It did win me a little bit. Is there play there? I can't decide. I don't think so. All right, we're good to go. All right, so that was actually very straightforward, at least for a Herman knife. Like I said, historically, this particular maker has been a little bit, well, it made life a little bit difficult for you in taking these apart, but this is running much, much better. First impressions time. My first impression of this is good. Oh, God, is this nice. I mean, it's nice in a couple of different ways. I'll go ahead and I'll clean off the Damascus here with this microfiber cloth, just so you can get a sense of what I got going on here. This is nice in a bunch of freaking ways. I mean, to start with, it's beautifully machined, like all the rest of them are, right? It's got just a really, really nice action. Listen to it. Yeah, that's good. The blade is nice. It's a very nice size. Here, I'll do a quick size comparison, Spyderco Delica, for you. So we see here, this is not a very big knife. So at least for me, that's definitely a plus. That's a perk. Actually, I'll put it up next to the Sting real quick so folks can get a sense of the relative size of these two. Yeah. So they're not so different, but the Vespertilio is a little bit smaller. The big difference with the Vespertilio is really the shape here. Not only do you get something that is kind of approximating a one-cliff blade, although there's certainly more of a reverse tanto sort of thing, but in the hand you get actually, it is quite nice. My only real objections to this knife are actually just right at the tip here. This little part back here is a little bit on the sharp side, and so when you're flipping this guy, you feel it a little bit. This was also the case with the Sting, but maybe a little less so. It's a little bit more rounded. This has sort of the profile of a batarang, let's be real here. So as a result, this guy feels a little bit sharper there. And as a result, it's also a little bit sharper in the pocket. So this not being super rounded off is a little bit uncomfortable, but it's a design choice they've made. The other thing I'll complain about very slightly is the tip of the flipper tab. It's got a little bit of a hook tip to it. That means it's going to deploy reliably, but it's also a little bit sharper on the finger than maybe I'd like. But either way, my first impressions of this knife are overwhelmingly positive. This is a beautiful knife, 100%, especially with these inlays here. The inlay work is great. The machining work is great. Like I said, I'm very suitably impressed. This was sent for review. Keep that in mind. And this might actually bug some people here. That little hole right there where the stop pin should go doesn't particularly get to me, but I can see that getting to some folks. But you know, for the most part, like I said, Herman does good work. I've looked at the Sting. I've looked at the Dragonfly, which is what the heck. That over here as well. Come here, Dragonfly. The Dragonfly is, as they would say in the business, a big freaking knife, and so the Vespertilio is dwarfed by it. But still, it has that Herman pattern. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the little Vespertilio here. I think it's a beautiful piece, and yeah. So, anyways, those are my first impressions. The action is great. The tent is just great. The sound of it's great. Blade is good with M390 coming to a ridiculously thin edge. With the nice inlay work, etc. I also kind of wish that this screw wasn't here. If they could have screwed that inlay from the other side, it might have looked a little bit cleaner. But, you know, at the same time, yeah. So anyways, that's my thoughts on the Vespertilio here. It's a little sharp in the back and a little sharp on the flipper tab. And aside from that, if you're liking the look of it, oh yeah, give it a shot. The fact that it's easier to maintain than the rest of them are, that's an even bigger win. So, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of the day. Bye now.